Welcome to Tune In YRDSB. The transition to post-secondary education can be exciting, but it can also bring a lot of questions. Questions about navigating new systems, accessing supports, and building independence. In this episode, we're sharing the lived experiences of 2 YRDSB alumni, along with insights and practical information for students with disabilities and families planning for that transition. You'll hear what the process looked like for them, how accommodations work in post-secondary, how to access supports and what to expect compared to high school. You'll also hear practical tips for everyday independence, like getting around and managing new routines. Before we begin, a note about language. Language is a powerful tool for equity and dignity. While we promote disability-affirming language, we honor individual preferences. To respect our guests today, we will be using person-first language. We recognize that people define and relate to disability in different ways, and that not all students may identify with the word disability. Disability can be understood through lived experience, identity, access needs, culture, community, and the barriers people encounter in systems and environments. This podcast is for any student navigating accessibility-related needs. We hope you find this conversation supportive and relevant to you as you plan and prepare for the transition to post-secondary education. Let's join the conversation.
So welcome and thank you for joining us. Today's conversation is focused on understanding the experience of students with disabilities as they transition from high school to post-secondary education. So today I'm joined by 2 YRDSB alumni who are currently attending university, and they've generously agreed to share their lived experience, the successes, the challenges, and what they've learned along the way. So let's start by introducing ourselves. I'm Jenni Kilgour. I'm a transition navigator with YRDSB.
It's nice to meet you. My name is Thalia, and I'm a 4th-year undergraduate student. I'm majoring in law and society.
Hi, nice to meet you as well. I am a 3rd-year undergrad student studying in social work.
And what is your name?
Oh, Daniel. I forgot the important part.
Well, you're here, and that's the important part. So I'm so glad to have both of you with us. So let's start off. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're currently studying?
I went to elementary and high school in YRDSB, and now I am studying social work in a post-secondary undergrad program. And I really enjoy the program because I'm studying what I really want to. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Daniel. Thalia?
For me, I really enjoy my program, and I chose it because I wanted to study the interrelationships between social issues, so things like race, socioeconomics, and gender in relation to the law.
Awesome. Thank you for both. So what drew you to the programs that you're studying? I think you mentioned a little bit, but is there anything else that you'd want to add about what you're loving about your programs?
I think the main reason why I was drawn to the program in the first place was supporting individuals and supporting people to navigate systems, and also I love research as well. I'm not currently pursuing formal research, but just researching on the side, trying to understand different framework and how that actually practically imply on people's life. That is fascinating for me. So yeah, that's what I really enjoy.
Well, I'm certainly glad you're on this podcast because we're going to use some of that interest in helping to gather some of the information that's going to be great for our listeners.
And I think for me, one thing that I probably wanted to add is that the reason why I chose my major was that because of the broader interdisciplinary focus, I was also admitted to criminology, but I decided on society because I liked not just the study of crime, but also from a more generalist kind of perspective. I guess more akin to what Daniel said is that I'm also a research assistant. So I work for the Center for Indigenous Knowledges and Languages. And in that, I essentially research about the different types of things that affect Indigenous people from a health perspective.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So, is there something that you're really enjoying about the broader post-secondary experience so far?
It's really enjoyable for me, being more independent or being more autonomous, making different choices in my education. I think like that really helped me understand and empower me to an extent of what I really wanted to do, and like what are my interests, what are my values, that kind of things got kind of figured out in the process. So that's really what I enjoy, and like just being out in the community, right? You get to be out and about a little bit more. You're not bound to just your like own community, like high school. You can go to downtown Toronto if you wanted to, right? Well, after you do assignments and exams, but like if you find the time, right? If you find the time, you can do that. So I think that's what I enjoy.
Yeah, there's lots to enrich your life within the post-secondary education world.
And I think to hop off of Daniel's point, I think that like beyond like an academic kind of perspective, one thing that I really enjoyed about the university life so far is that you get to try out different things that are new. So for example, like you can go sightseeing like not only on like your campus per se, but you can also go beyond the campus and go downtown and do different things. I know for a fact that Daniel and I have certainly had like a couple of trips downtown, actually to like Yorkdale. So it's been like quite a fun experience just being able to kind of use the transit system and see how that works to take it all the way down to Toronto.
Amazing. Yeah, you're really getting out there and exploring and doing new things. And let's talk about the transition process, moving from high school to post-secondary. It can involve a lot of moving parts. So what did that process look like for you?
For me, pandemic had an impact. I graduated in June 2021. I was in online class for about a year and a half, so that really sort of delayed my transition planning a bit than what I expected from the beginning. I would say I didn't start my transitioning planning super early, but start early, please, because there's a lot of moving parts, and the first thing that you're going to be met with is getting into your post-secondary institution, whether that is college, university, or trade, whatever that is. You have to be admitted, so that application process takes a while, and that's your kind of first formal experience of what you want to do. That process can start as early as grade 9, but actual admission, that takes quite a bit of time. So be prepared to do paperwork and submit your application. Do that earlier than later, because after you get admitted or even before you get accepted, there's some things that you have to do, such as some assessments, and I did a whole overlook of the IEP, overview of IEP, to figure out what components from my IEP that can be transferred over to my post-secondary education.
And just to be clear, the IEP is the Individualized Education Plan, and that's the plan for students that outlines any accommodations that they might have. Some even have program pages on them, but I think for university, it's really those accommodations that we're really looking at to see what's going to translate into the post-secondary environment.
Yes, that is correct.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that's involved in that transition to university. So we've figured out what we want to do or what program we're interested in, the application for it, looking at the accommodations that have been helpful. What else is involved in that transition?
I would say, like, once you determine, like, what types of accommodations are necessary, like, with an accessibility counselor, you'd probably have something called a letter of accommodation, and we abbreviate it as the LOA, and the LOA essentially is like the university equivalent of an IEP, if you will. Essentially, this letter gets facilitated to your professors and your teaching assistants, or TAs, and it outlines your academic accommodations in a confidential type of file. And so with this in mind, it's important, as Daniel said, to start really early because you want to have this LOA sorted so that by the time September rolls around, you feel ready and confident and perhaps even looking forward to engaging in the classroom setting. I guess another thing that I would probably touch upon is that it's really important to attend some of like the summer programming that the Student Accessibility Services Office that they might offer at your college or at your university. A lot of these programs are related to transition, so they'll help you kind of to determine different types of like core aspects of your transition. So like taking you on things like campus tours, taking you to like a university lecture hall or a university like classroom, and it's really different from like a high school experience. So these things are really important to kind of seek out.
Getting in touch with your university, reaching out, getting connected even before you start class in September. Awesome. Looking back to your high school self, what did you learn about yourself in high school that really helped you once you got to university?
My journey of independence really started in high school, trying to figure out the schedule. Even though the schedule is quite structured compared to post-secondary, in high school you kind of have your own classes to go to. So that experience kind of translates into university in my case, right? So I think that really helped. And also just knowing that there is resources, it looks quite different in post-secondary. However, knowing that there's some sort of support is better than, oh, I'm here alone, right? I'm doing this alone. First thing that I did in my first year was trying to figure out what kind of different resources that our school offer, right? So different schools have different resources. Please go to the Accessibility Office website, investigate it, do a deep dive on the website. And I just want to briefly touch upon the intake process as well, if that's okay. You're going to attend meetings like one that you kind of did with IPRC. For some students, think about that meeting, but on a different scale. You're going to be in your driver's seat. You are going to be one that are primarily speaking about yourself. So be prepared. It's not something that they are going to be like, oh, you said something wrong and penalize you. No, but it can feel quite intimidating, whether you like it or not, just because you're in a different setting. So just be mentally prepared. It's okay. That meeting is for you.
I'm glad you brought this up, Daniel, because it really is about talking about two different systems, right? There's the high school system and how it works, and then there's the post-secondary education system, and navigating and shifting between those two systems. And Thalia, you have actually a really unique experience because not only did you access the accessibility offices, but you worked in one, didn't you? Yeah. So can you add a little bit of information, just like in general, what do accessibility services look like in post-secondary and at your school?
Sure. So I guess a couple of things that you might want to keep in mind about what we do is that firstly, we deal with academic accommodations. So if you require things or if you have something on your IEP that's something that's similar. Some of the academic accommodations may include things like extra time for assignments, may include things like memory aids, different types of like note-taking, so like peer or professional types of note-taking. If you receive any accommodations for exams such as extra time, that's typically written in what we call an ALF exam center. And this is like a separate space for students to write like invigilated exams. So invigilated means like somebody watching you while you write the exam, but it's in a secure space. So they're essentially promoting like academic integrity within that. A couple of the other things that we also do is assistive technology. So things that are related to training and even helping students access assistive technology. We have some assistive technology specialists in the office, and some of the assistive tech include things like Inspiration 10, which is like a mind mapping software, Kurzweil 3000, which is like a screen reading, if you will, and then we have Dragon, which is speech to text, and these are the core technology that we help out with. But another one of them is like LiveScribe pen, which essentially is like a small like recording type of pen, and it really helps students kind of like learn, because they can take this pen and like record audio lectures as part of their academic accommodation. So it's really cool.
It sounds like there's a lot of technologies that might be different or that are continuing to develop too, that the post-secondary institutions might have access to and be able to support students in exploring. But as I understand it, the accommodations in university is really based on what you're taking, what your needs are to access that education uniquely. It's not necessarily the same thing across the board for everyone in every setting.
Exactly. And I think, sorry, just to add on to a couple more things that we cover in our office, is we also do some peer support events. So if you're looking to connect with somebody within the disability community who may share like a similar undergraduate or like a college experience, we definitely do have those things. We have things that support your learning, such as like body doubling. So essentially you learn alongside somebody and they kind of keep you accountable. As well. We also, for our accessibility counselors, they also help out with things that are funding related for people with disabilities, so things like OSAP, and more particularly the bursary for students with disabilities, also known as the BWSD.
Thank you. That's a lot of great information. Accommodations and supports often look different between high school. So there's a difference in how accommodations are provided and what accommodations are provided. So I think you went into a little bit of that, but is there anything else you want to add about the differences between high school and post-secondary?
In high school, you have teachers like CERT, and those teachers are pretty accessible. You can, go downstairs and knock on their door and go, I need help, I need support. In university or post-secondary, that moves a bit slower. So have patience, email them, plan ahead if that's possible. I know there's some emergency that could happen, so that's okay. But just know that the response time might be a little bit different, and accessibility services might be a bit further down in the campuses than just going downstairs to a room. So just know that there's timeline differences, and if you need something, email. If you need any extra supports, email your accessibility counselor, and know that it's going to take time. So I think one of the tips that I can give for first year students, go to your classes. If the schedule is available for you and you enrolled in your classes, go to that physical location if your classes are physical, and identify some of the accessibility needs for that particular room. And if you need that, email them. So before September, that is set up, right? And review your letter of accommodation. there might be system that is sending out that letter to your professor, but I would recommend email the PDF version of that letter to your professor again, just to introduce yourself, like, hi, my name is Daniel, I'm taking your class, here's my major accessibility needs, because the letter can be long, right? The list can go on and go on, and professors might go, I don't know what this student actually needs for my class in context of my class. So have that conversation in the beginning of the semester. I would say every semester, if it is a new professor, have that conversation. And again, it's really good for you as well, because you're going to have that connection, right? So it's
That's really practical advice.
It's a win-win situation. So have that conversation. You don't have to be super formal about it. You can just even email the professor before the first class and be like, could we talk about this bit further after class? So explain your situation, explain your circumstances, and if there's certain accommodation that you might need more because of the design of the class, bring that up. And I think the best way to end that conversation is, can I email you or can I reach out to you if anything changes or if I need any further supports? I think that kind of establishes a expectation that you might reach out to for support. So professors know that might happen.
That's a great explanation and very practical of how to take those accommodations, but also really look at your space where you'll be studying, where you'll be learning, to figure out what the boundaries or the barriers or any accessibility needs you might have in that space, within that context, because there's a lot of different learning spaces in post-secondary. It might be a lab, it might be a classroom space, it might be on different floors, it might be an amphitheater. There's probably lots of different things that might come up with the spaces that you might have to access.
I would say that in high school, there's a lot more, if you will, like colloquial speaking. You'll typically have like a special education resource teacher, like a CERT, who will help you administer like the IEP that you have. And so in that regard, it's really based on your needs. So things that are related to like indirect support, if you need like resource assistance, withdrawal assistance, or even like using a specialized education classroom, you usually you don't really have to talk directly to your teacher about like your needs, because this is usually facilitated by like a core meeting that you'll have at the beginning of the school year about your IEP with your homeroom teachers and your teachers of different subjects in high school. And also the core curriculum can be modified, which is a really key component of like a high school type of experience, versus in university, like the curriculum cannot be modified. Academic accommodations are meant to give students the opportunity to achieve equal level of participation and equal access in their education. So it's not really a modification per se. And in that regard, you are the one who is responsible for essentially reaching out to get your academic accommodation. And so in that regard, it's very different type of experience, because it's a lot more easier to fall through the cracks, unfortunately, than it would be in high school.
That's really practical, and thank you for pointing out the difference between modifications and accommodations and what that looks like in high school and what that looks like in post-secondary, because I think that really helps you prepare for the difference and what you need to speak to and what you need to advocate for, and what Accessibility Office can do to support you in accessing your education in university. So thank you for that. Thank you both. Let's talk about a little bit more practical. Outside of academics, there are things like transportation and getting around campus that can also be part of the transition. So what advice do you have for students and families as they think about transportation?
This is where I have little bit more experience using public transit. So if you are a student who have physical disability, you might be used to using school buses to get to school. In university, or post-secondary, you have to find your own way to campuses. If you're in residence, that's a different story. But if you are commuting, the first major strategy would be public transportation. Now, they do say that conventional transit is accessible, and they are most of the time, but you might benefit from something called paratransit, which is a door-to-door service offered by different cities and towns. So if you're from York region, for us, it's called YRT, Mobility on Request, paratransit, and it's a door-to-door service that basically acts like a bridge between conventional transit and your accessibility needs. Mostly who has physical disabilities or mobility challenges. If you have any issues using public transit because of physical needs, you can get that service. You do need a medical professional's note or letter in that application for most cities and towns. So please get that as well. And again, for this transition as well, start early. I would even encourage students to use the service a couple of times in your grade 12 years to just get the feel for it and if you like it. And just know that if you're utilizing that service, there is 3 categories of service, which is unconditional, which means you get the paratransit all the time, or conditional, which means paratransit provider might take you to a bus terminal, and you can use a bus, and different vehicle might show up at a different terminal. So it's like a connection, right? So that will be assessed at the beginning of that intake process. So just know that there's processes as well, and there's also a process of booking your trips. So just be mindful of planning ahead. That's the whole thing about transportation. And also, if you have access to funding like BSWD, there is an option for transportation. You do need evidence that you need that. But if you have significant mobility challenges and using public transit, you can try to utilize that funding as well. I personally use public transit, but that's an option as well.
I think what I'm hearing you say is regardless of which transit that you might require, knowing that it's not going to be a school bus, right? It's not going to be a school bus, and you'll have to find your own way there. So learning to use transit in whatever form that is, whether it is YRT or whether it's another service, but just learning to have experience with organizing schedules, knowing where it goes, what it costs, how to access it, how to arrange it, all of that, and feeling confident to get to where you need to go, learning the route. So that sounds like it was a big part.
I think that, like, in terms of getting more comfortable with the system, it's really important to kind of understand what we call as the family of services at the YRT. So essentially, well, as Daniel said, that they do offer like a door-to-door service. Sometimes they will require you to hop on like a bus, if you will, at a designated bus stop. And so getting familiar with those things, and as well as like cross-boundary trips. So, for example, if you're somebody who's living in York region and you need to go to university downtown in Toronto, well, you're going to have to cross a couple of boundaries and you're probably going to have to wait at a couple of stations. So just getting familiar with the kind of waiting area, what to do in case of an emergency, getting more familiar with like the safety components. So like if you're like what would make you feel the most safe and the most confident in navigating like a transportation independently. So for example, this may include things like location sharing, like with a trusted individual, or perhaps even simply carrying like a personal like alarm that you can pull. And I think that another thing is that it's important to know that some transit agencies, they do offer like sunflower lanyards or sunflower pins for people who have hidden types of disabilities.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Thank
it's really
you.
cool.
Yeah.
And some of the funding programs that are also related that may help you as you navigate transportation needs is to keep in mind that a lot of the times transit agencies have different types of fares, so that operate at a reduced kind of amount, so you'll pay less. So things like the TTC youth fare for those that are under 19, or if you need to travel and get like a post-secondary travel card for like a month, those things are really helpful in helping to reduce the cost, as well as like there's like a Easterfield like transit card, if you will, for the Via Rail and coach services.
Thank you for that. That's such good information and such a big part of that transition planning and preparing for what it looks like in that world. Life in post-secondary also brings about new routines, food planning, grocery shopping, doing laundry. Can you share how you adapted to these life skill changes and responsibilities, and what advice would you give to high school students about building these independent routines?
I think one piece of advice I probably mentioned earlier would be to start as early as you can. It may not be necessarily doing it all by yourself, right? Because that would be really hard to do and to expect. That would be really unfair. But definitely start small. So where you can, for things like grocery shopping and like doing the laundry, you can definitely see if you can help one of your parents or your guardian in terms of like those types of tasks, and see if you can slowly build up. Sometimes it also may require some types of physical modifications in order to access these spaces as well. So just important to keep in mind.
I also want to mention that there's a lot of online services for grocery or even just getting things done. There's a lot of online services and pickup. So what you could do is, let's say you go to a grocery store, you basically put a online order in, and you do a pickup service, right? You request a pickup. And then what you can do while your YRT mobility on request is coming back to get you, in my case, I do additional shopping. I do, fruits and fresh produce. That component might be, it might be better to just look at the produce, right? So I don't order that online. I do that physically. That way you kind of split the labor, to say, right? You don't have to worry about a bulk of your grocery, but you just have to worry about particular parts of your grocery, and rest of it you can just do a pickup. So there's other conventional ways to do those things, and don't be scared. There's always a way. You will, and try to enjoy that process, trying to figure out a different way to get the same thing done. And I know some people might tell you, or you might have heard that, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. But it's really finding a different way to enjoy your life.
It sounds like not only is it practicing the skill of actually just doing it, but figuring out the different ways that are available and then making it your own. What's gonna make sense for you, for your schedule, for the community where you're living. And it sounds like you develop that over time. just figuring that out. But there certainly are skills that you can practice early on.
For sure, and I think that a large component of it is also related to like things like planning. So if you need support in terms of planning out how you're going to go and build your routine, things like keeping a calendar in like a conspicuous place, so a place that you'll check often, can be really helpful. Daniel and I were talking about this earlier, but things like digital calendars are really helpful as well, just so that you can set reminders on your phone as to like, oh, this is the time I need to do X, Y, and Z. It can be really helpful as just a prompt as well.
One of you mentioned before, and I think this is really important, but not only are there academic transitions and accessibility services, we talked about transportation and then just taking care of food and laundry and groceries, but there's medical transitions as well for students that might be managing medical needs or certain physical needs. There's also just the healthcare piece and medical piece. Can you speak to just that transition a little bit, and what do students and families need to know and how to prepare for that transition?
Right. So I'm not sure what you're used to of your current setup in terms of healthcare, but generally speaking, a lot of different services are in one place by one provider, or by one provider might be provided by different providers, but in the one place. Or you have that point person to go to write that email, and that person might be able to figure out your needs and coordinate different things. When you turn 18 or 21, that is practically gone for the most part.
There's a massive change that
Yes.
happens from the adult or the world of pediatrics to the world of adults.
Yes.
Right?
And you're going to have different providers in different locations. And I want to mention that your coordinator for healthcare becomes your family doctor. So you might have to speak a little bit more to your family doctor to get referred to different clinics, different places, and you might have to schedule different appointments for different providers. So just know that it's going to be scattered around different places, and it might feel like playing a very complicated version of broken telephone. You might have to communicate the same thing over and over again. You might have to write that intake form multiple times. I don't know what to tell you.
Talia's nodding.
Yeah, it's just the process, and it's just how it's designed. So just be mentally prepared. I do want to say that there is different community resources, and there could be a coordinator by different social service providers. So look into that. I can't really point to one place because you might be in the different locations, different area, but there is supports available. So don't be disappointed. There is guidance, especially in your first or second year of post-secondary. There's programs targeted for that, including healthcare. So
That's great to know. Thank you for that. Is there anything, Thalia, that you want to add to?
I think that for me, what was most surprising is that the transition from pediatric to adult care is very distinct in the sense that oftentimes in the pediatric level, there's more access to things like specialists. And these things might be helpful if you're trying to receive specialized services or treatments. And these things, they kind of fade away as you age into an adult care unless you need more of an active kind of stance, if you will. So it's important to keep in mind that if you're looking to access certain services, it may be helpful to start the paperwork a bit earlier rather than like having to wait until you turn 18 and then wait for the transitional period, and then you're kind of out of luck, if you will. And also what was surprising to me is that I'm not sure if this is for everyone, but when you go to the doctor and you request them to fill out medical forms, they will charge you. And they will charge you, like, sometimes a lot of money, or money that's not really necessarily affordable, like, if you're trying to keep, like, a tight budget. And so this is very distinct from youth care, where you can get a letter and you can get it for free, and they will happily provide it to you for free. So yeah, it was really kind of eye-opening in that regard. So that's just one thing I would also keep in mind too.
Back to the accessibility services, you might have to get your educational assessments to get your letter of accommodation. That itself is pretty expensive. So if you're under 18 or before you leave high school, you might be able to have different funding options to get that done before you leave high school. So please start that process. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that.
It's kind of hard to quantify disability, and so a lot of the forms that you are going to get filled out, you may have to get them filled out again, as Daniel said before. And it's kind of difficult because a lot of the time these forms will ask you to quantify the impact of your disability, but in a numerical type of sense, and it may not necessarily be applicable to your own experiences of how you view disability and how you think that it may not be quantified as something as that, but these impact your accommodations. And so when you're receiving academic accommodations, you may find that you have to go back and redo the paperwork because the numerical score that you may receive may relate to the actual level or type of accommodation that you receive.
That's actually a really good point. So thank you for mentioning that, because it really has to translate into what is going to support you in the context where those accommodations are essential to access your education, to be able to manage your life within the post-secondary environment. So that's a great point. Thank you for that. Support can come from a lot of different places, and this transition from high school to post-secondary, I'm sure, involved key partners in supporting this transition. So who were they? In your experience, who played those key roles in helping you to navigate, and what made that support particularly helpful to you?
In the high school level, I do have to say the student success team was really helpful in identifying my goals and just getting ready for that transition and telling me what to expect from that process. And I remember them saying it's a controlled chaos. Be prepared. So I think that one word or one phrase actually sums it up really well. It's a controlled chaos, and remember, you're in control. So you can learn a lot from that process. So don't think it's it's a process that I have to get through, fight through. It's a learning experience.
It's a learning experience. And part of this podcast is so that it's a little less chaotic, yes. Right? What can we do so that we can kind of work through, take the information that we gather over time and put a good plan into place, ask the right questions, tap the right people on the shoulder, get things in place before we land at, say, a college program day one in September, and feel a little bit lost. So I think this is one of the things that we're trying to control for, is a little bit lessening that chaos. Yeah, and Thalia, was there any partner in the transition process that was particularly supportive, and why?
I would definitely say my OT. I think that she was really supportive. She went above and beyond for me, and I think that I would definitely not be where I am today without her support. She has identified various funding opportunities for me. She's helped me with various types of equipment, filling, and so these things have been really instrumental in my success at the university level as well. Another, individual or group of individuals who I would think at the high school level would probably be my CERT, so my special education resource teacher, and my high school teachers as well. I think that they played a key component in my learning, and that has helped me transition and has really reinforced the autonomy and self-agency in that regard. So I think that they've been really helpful. And at the university level, I would say the Accessibility Services Office, academically and as well as professionally, they have assisted me in ways that I'm really grateful for, and as well as my TAs and my professors.
A lot of people to thank. Transition isn't just about one person. It really does involve a team effort, doesn't it? You know, and welcoming those people into your team, and even asking them questions and working side by side through this transition. Thank you for mentioning those people. But you also mentioned something about agency, and I wanted to move into more this idea of self-advocacy, representing yourself, speaking to your needs. And self-advocacy is often talked about as an important part of this transition journey. So what does that look like in a post-secondary setting, and what are some ways that students can start building that skill before they graduate?
In terms of like building self-advocacy, I don't think it's something that happens overnight. I definitely think it's something that's more of like a cumulative type of process. So you kind of build up to it. For me, I started attending my IEP meetings in grade 6. And around that time, and so by the time I was in high school, I was able to independently lead some of the sessions, which was really helpful in terms of like my self-advocacy, but that may not be applicable to necessarily other people who have disabilities. As well, I think that like in terms of like accessing or building support at the university level or at the post-secondary education level, it becomes much more of like an independent thing. Like you really have to advocate for yourself, otherwise you will fall through the cracks, and that's inevitable and unfortunate. But it's just the way that the university and the college system is that it's really just set up so that the student has the sole responsibility of reaching out for help and receiving and requesting help for academic accommodations.
Thank you. Yeah, so it really is something that it's not if you have responsibility in university, you will have responsibility in university. You will have to be in the driver's seat. You do, so how can we learn some of those self-advocacy skills and how to participate? I love the fact that in grade 6, you were part of your meetings within the school and learning. And I'm sure that was a growth process for you too, wasn't it?
For sure,
to
yeah.
learn how to be in a meeting with all these adults at the table, and maybe it felt awkward, or how do I say something? Is it even important what I have to say? But learning to use your voice, and over time. So that's a great example. So thank you for sharing that.
For me, I'm the primary English speaker in my household, so I basically had to lead IEP meetings, translate my IEP so that my parents understand what's going on. So I think, yes, self-advocacy, it takes a while to build. So if you are in grade 11, grade 12, and feel that you're scared and nervous, don't worry. That's honestly, I felt scared too. So those skills, if you try and if you try constantly, it will build over time, and those experience makes you unique, and that's okay. So that's also a learning experience, and don't feel scared to CC people in your email, because you don't want to write multiple email for the same thing. So please advise on the next steps. So that's fine. It can feel like you're bothering multiple people, but if that's something that you have to do in your colleges, university, trade, whatever, go for it, because those supports are there for you. And I will say this pretty directly, but you are paying your tuition. So those supports are there for you. You paid it.
Use it.
The reason why I say this in this way is I felt bad utilizing those supports in my first year. So just to get that mental piece of, I might bother different people because I need this support. Those people are there for you. So don't feel bad seeing people or emailing different people or calling people. It's fine.
Great advice. Thank you, Daniel, for that. Parents and caregivers might wonder how they can support their children to foster independence, right? They might wonder how to do that. What advice would you want to give to them?
I think that every family is different, so there's no one way or a right way, if you will, to give advice or to approach advice. I think that every family is subjective and they have their own experiences. But if I were to give a piece of advice, it would probably be to prioritize open communication. I think that open communication is a really important aspect of transitional support because it allows your child to essentially be confident and be comfortable telling you about their needs and what they want and what they hope to achieve. And it also helps you to have that dialogue back with them, to express maybe some of your concerns, what you hope for them to achieve, and vice versa. And they can really become a key to each other, a key component in achieving your academic goals as you emerge into post-secondary education.
I want to say that it might be scared for parents to see their students go off to a new world, new environment, and I understand that because you might have imagined your kids going into high school, and that might be nervous too, right? From elementary to high school, it's kind of like that, but in a different scale. So it's important to, I think, do two things, right? Which is acknowledge that students are in their driver's seat, but also letting them know that you're here behind them and you trust their decisions and educational decisions that they make along the way. So that personally was a big support for me, knowing that they will support me and understand why I make those decisions. So yeah, honestly, just being there for them is a huge difference.
Is there anything you'd want educators to know or better understand about what this transition from high school to post-secondary is like for students with disabilities?
There is multiple layers of transition going on at the same time. So you might be, as an educator, focused on a mission, trying to figure out a different pathway, but for the student and the family, especially the family, they have to figure out the different service providers for adult health care or different coordinators for different services that they might need. So you might be like, we need to get this done quick, but they are dealing with so much more than what you're trying to coordinate.
That's a great reminder.
Be patient. That's why I am also telling educators to start early, remind families and students that you might want to start early, figure things out, even encourage, if you are listening, encourage family and students to start on medical transition earlier than the education transition, because that transition can start early, usually. So just encourage them, let them know that might be beneficial to their circumstances. You can use your professional judgment in terms of would that advice be, useful for families and students, but just know that maybe it's better to figure out certain parts of the transition process a bit earlier than others, so that it's more of a step-by-step process rather than just doing everything at once and trying to figure out different things at the same time.
It sounds like having educators understand the complexity that there is, how many layers and different factors there are to consider for students with disabilities, and that the early planning and just the understanding and appreciation of all the different factors that we may not see within the education system, but that are actually going on with the family in the community, trying to figure out the other supports and transitions that are needed at the same time. So that's a fantastic point. Thank you for bringing that up. Is there anything else that you'd want educators to know about this transition?
I think that Daniel has pretty much covered it. We definitely do appreciate our educators and their support for our transition. And if I could add one thing in terms of like design for learning, I think that it's really important for educators, particularly at the higher education level, to incorporate principles of universal design. I think that it makes for a more inclusive and accessible space. For example, one of my professors this year, they mandated the use of class note-taking. So class note-taking and class note sharing through a Google Drive as part of like the participation requirement. And I thought that that was a really interesting way to incorporate accessibility for all students at the higher education level.
If you could go back to high school, what's one thing you wish you knew about this transition to post-secondary education?
There's going to be a lot of questions asked to you, and you might not know the answer right away. All you have to do is, I will think about it and let you know. And don't feel scared to say, my answers might change. Because circumstances change all the time. Our medical situations change all the time. It's okay. It's hectic already, and it's important to feel safe in that process, and those professionals, educators are here for you.
I think that there's a lot of information that is going to be thrown at you at once. It can be kind of overwhelming at times, especially because of the sheer amount of information. But please know that you can always go back and ask questions, and I think that's a really important process. And it makes it kind of recursive because you learn over time, and I think that those things are really important because you may forget what information you missed, but you can always ask for the information, and people will be usually more than happy to assist you along the way.
What's one message that you'd like to leave for high school students with disabilities who are thinking about going to post-secondary education?
You made it this far. You're thinking about transition. That itself is pretty amazing. It is your story. You have the pen to write it. No one can take away that pen from you. And just know that questions in the intake form or any questions that you get asked professionally doesn't define you.
I think that if I were to give advice to students, it would probably be to don't be afraid to try new things. I think that you're going to be a little bit out of your comfort zone, for at least a little bit, but you'll definitely find that you'll learn some new skills along the way. And I'd also say that one other piece of advice that I'd give is that everybody's educational path looks very different. There's no right way to getting your post-educational credentials. Even if you don't get your credentials, that's totally okay too. Everybody's journey is different, and what that looks like for you may look like something totally different for another person.
I really appreciate all the information that the two of you had to share. I kind of feel like there's so much more we could talk about here. But I just want to thank you for sharing your experiences, the information that you've had, the journey that you've had from high school to post-secondary. You certainly are a wealth of information, and there's so much value in hearing directly from the lived experience that you have as students with disabilities who have gone through both systems now, your experience, your insights. So thank you so much for your time and for being here with me today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for listening. A few key themes stood out in the conversation. Accommodation and supports change between high school and post-secondary. Self-advocacy and taking the driver's seat is important. And families and educators play an important role in supporting students. One message was clear: preparing early makes a difference. For students and families, we hope this conversation offered both practical insight and some reassurance as you plan your next steps forward. If you're looking for more information, visit the Transition Hub at YRDSB.ca for practical tips and resources. You can also connect with your school's guidance counselor or special education resource teacher. Thank you to our guests for sharing their expertise, and thank you for listening. We hope you'll join us again.